Hey guys, so you're probably wondering, A, why haven't I been on YouTube that much lately, and I'm really sorry about that, and I'll explain that in a later video. And you're probably also wondering, B, where the heck am I, and why am I dressed in fancy clothes? Well guys, I'm here to bring you a dramatic reading of a fan fiction entitled No Homo Though, which I read and I thought it was pretty funny, and it's fluffy, which is good because I don't want this video to get flagged, and I thought I'd just bring you something different rather than vlogs. So this is my fancy reading clothes. And before I start, I just want to have a short little disclaimer. First of all, I did get permission to use this from the author. Second of all, yes, I ship Phan. No, I don't think it's real. I think Dan and Phil are best friends, they're roommates, but they're not gay together. I'm sorry. I will be going in between the characters, and I will attempt a British accent. It's not going to be that good, but I'm gonna try, okay? Alrighty, so here we go! Yes, I do have dimples. Look! Dan beamed, pointing at his dimple on his cheek. Dan and Phil were sitting in their living room couch doing a live show on a Tuesday evening. They hadn't done one together in a very long time, and Phil had been excited when Dan had asked him to join. They'd been going for nearly an hour, genuinely enjoying themselves. But it's a deformation! It's not cute! I think it's cute. Phil voiced suddenly. Sometimes he liked to just stare at Dan's dimples. When he smiled, laughed, or looked at Phil, his dimple would show and Phil would feel a rush of warmth in his chest. Sometimes he would have sudden urges to touch them, to brush his thumb lightly against the small craters in Dan's cheeks. He never did touch them though, because wouldn't it be a bit weird to spontaneously touch your best friend's cheek? I really want to touch it, he thought to himself as Dan smiled at his laptop screen. Suddenly, Dan burst out laughing, the high-pitched sound filling the room, and Phil could feel it going directly to his heart, forming his lips into a huge smile. What, Phil? Dan said, looking at Phil, the dimples now even clearer on his face. Phil finally realized that his declaration of wanting to touch Dan's dimples had been said out loud as opposed to in his head, so he decided to just go for it. He raised his hand slowly, edging it closer to Dan's face and touching his dimple lightly with his thumb. Dan went still, staring intensely at Phil's finger until he gazed slowly upwards, for a moment lingering on Phil's slightly parted lips until their eyes connected. It's so cute. Can I kiss it? Phil said, still gazing into Dan's beautiful brown eyes. Phil mentally slapped himself for asking the inappropriate question. Why couldn't he just think before he spoke? He'd always admired Dan's looks, and had always had small urges to just take his cheeks into his hands and connect their lips. He'd always shrugged those thoughts off, though. He couldn't kiss his best friend. At this, Dan flung his head away from Phil's hand, laughing with a clearly visible blush on his cheeks. Phil, he whined, pushing his shoulders softly. Phil felt the affection in his touch and couldn't help but smile. You can't just kiss me on a live show, you spoon! A rush of disappointment went through Phil's body. Of course he knew his friend would reject him. They were live in front of thousands of people. What had he even been thinking? He looked down in shame, trying to make it seem as if he was jokingly disappointed. Dan just shook his head, laughing, and continued answering questions. For the rest of the live show, Phil couldn't keep his eyes off Dan's smile. When Dan and Phil had finished doing their live show, Phil reached for his laptop on the table in front of them, having decided to scroll through Tumblr for a bit. Dan was doing the same thing after all. After a few minutes of looking at pictures of dogs and supernatural gifts by accident, Phil started to think about Dan and how they had appeared in the live show. Had he been gazing too long into Dan's eyes for it to be platonically? Had his question about kissing Dan seemed too genuine? Phil's thoughts led him to absent-mindedly typing Phan into the Tumblr search bar. When he realized what he was doing, he subtly shifted a bit away from Dan so he couldn't peek at his screen. What he found was interesting. The majority of the posts were gifs of him and Dan during the kissing question segment of the live show, with emphasis on the moment Dan had said,
can't just kiss me on a live show, you spoon.
Which obviously had made viewers believe that something else was going on. Phil was confused. Had Dan really only rejected him because they had been in front of an audience? Phil had been stupid to ask, of course, but that didn't explain why Dan would have used that particular phrase. Phil considered shrugging it off as an innocent mistake, but his curiosity got the better of him. "Hey, Dan," Phil inquired, looking up slightly from his screen. "How come you said you didn't want to kiss me on the live show?" He tried to ask Dan as casually as possible, as if the question was a simple conversation about the weather, but his heart suddenly started to pound faster, and his voice didn't hold as much confidence as he wanted it to. "I mean, you clearly put an emphasis on the last part, as if, you know," he trailed off. "Really, Phil? Do you want to talk about this now?" Dan answered, absent-mindedly, not looking up from his laptop. Phil didn't know what to reply. Instead, he properly looked up from his screen, still on Tumblr, and looked at Dan with raised eyebrows, expecting him to continue. Dan finally looked up, connecting their eyes. Dan's brown eyes were shining in the glint of the light, but at the same time unusually darker than normal. He looked almost nervous as he continued. "Well, it's not like a small kiss on the cheek is a big thing. Not something I would mind, anyway." If Phil's emotions had been visible in the expression in his face, he would have looked stunned and inappropriately joyed. Dan had literally just allowed Phil to give him a peck on the cheek. Phil's heart was beating faster than it should, as Phil edged closer to Dan on the couch, their eyes still connected. When he was sitting close enough, he leaned in towards Dan's cheek, reaching for his dimple, and closed his eyes subconsciously. When his lips touched Dan's cheek, Phil was struck with an unexpected feeling. Instead of the softness of Dan's skin, he was met with the feeling of a warm, wet softness. He had intended to just give Dan a light peck on the cheek, but he realized that Dan had turned around the minute Phil had closed his eyes to connect their lips together. Phil had gone still. It was no longer just a peck. Dan was moving his lips eagerly against Phil's, making Phil subconsciously kiss back, their lips now dancing with each other, fitting perfectly. In Phil's moment of euphoria of having Dan's lips on his, he placed his hand lightly on Dan's chest, motioning him to lie down on the couch. Dan did as implied, and Phil pressed his body on top of him, at the same time deepening the kiss. Dan let out a small moan in between kisses, which sent heat rushing straight to Phil's cock. Suddenly, Dan broke apart, looking up at Phil. His eyes were big with lust, and Phil spotted a hint of desperation in his black, dilated pupils. Phil noticed how the boy's chest underneath him was rising up and down unsteadily, and he could clearly hear his heartbeat. "Phil?" he whimpered, as he shifted around uncomfortably underneath him. In his motions, Phil could feel Dan's erection pressing up against his thigh, and he had to relieve a breath he didn't know he had been holding in. "Would I be killing the mood if I said no homo?" Phil wanted to laugh. Looking at Dan's expression, he noticed how nervous the boy was. But even though his joke hadn't been a complete mood killer, he didn't want to give Dan the satisfaction. "This isn't the time for insecure jokes, Dan," Phil voiced, far more confident than earlier. "Now shut up and kiss me." He reached down for Dan's willing lips, continuing their kiss as if nobody had interrupted. And there you have it, the No Homo fic. I'll have a link in the description of the fic and you can read it if you want. Also make sure to check out the author. I will also have a link to her blog. And make sure you give this video a big thumbs up. Make sure you comment what your favorite fanfiction is because I would like to read it. And make sure you subscribe because I will be making more videos in the future. And hopefully there'll be something creative like this and not just vlogs anymore. I'm really hoping for that. And my next vlog will be telling you what I've been up to since the last time I made a video. There's been a lot going on. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video and I really hope this was something that would make you want to subscribe because I really hope to be doing more of these soon in the future. Not just these, but just anything in general. Anything creative, I guess. Yeah, so bye guys.